Shook's just a damn good jungler on his own merits, and everyone's very happy to have him on board. But now we have 5 people on the same page for a lot of mid to late game instances. Obviously, you could work on the early game aspect of that.
Hey everyone, this is Darius from the Shotcaller, and I'm very honored to be joined by Veteran for the first time. Of course, we've never done this interview before.
We've never done this before at all.
Now, you just managed to completely upset G2. The early game was dodgy, questionable, but at the end of the day, you drafted for late game, and that worked out.
Yeah. What do you mean by other game? You mean the first time you played against G2, or...?
No, this one.
Oh, okay, so you mean the early game. Yeah, no, we played the early game like horse shit. And there's a lot of things to go over for this game. We shouldn't have to rely on us perfect gaming draft every time to achieve victories, but so far that's how we've been getting them against top teams, and that's just not on if we're serious about making a deep playoff run. So there are obviously problems in our early game that needs to be fixed. We're not going to become a team that just becomes reliant on getting really good compositions every time. That's a promise to all the H2K fans. We have time to work on these issues, and we will.
Okay, good, nice promise there right out at the start. Now, I feel like I could at least be an assistant coach right now for the EULCS, because I would just go to a team and go like, okay guys, draft for late game. Don't fuck up until the first 30 minutes and just play it from there. Because all the previous games, or like a vast majority of them, are just get to the late game, win, done.
I mean, well, what just happened wasn't even a case of that we drafted necessarily for late game. Okay. It just so happened that G2's draft and a lot of blue side drafts today, for some weird reason, give themselves really narrow windows for success. And the way that the meta has been for the entire season, it's very difficult to close on those certain windows. It's not necessarily that we draft for late game. We actually drafted the composition where we spike at similar points to them. The issue is just that we keep spiking afterwards, and it's really difficult for them to play out the game. Also, our matchups were, I mean, as you'd expect on red side, our matchups are almost direct counters in top and bot, but the issue is much more that the top teams at the very least, I'm really interested in knowing what's going on in their scrims, because they're doing really, really strange compositions that I just don't agree with at all. Like Misfits versus Splice, for example. Splice essentially handed the game on the silver platter in draft phase. I really couldn't figure out what was going on there.
And still, Splice ended up winning the game relatively quite fair.
I mean, I just said Misfits handed it to them on the silver.
Oh, Misfits. Okay,
Misfits handed. Blue side today, or at least up to what I've seen. This is literally just after the Splice game. Just after our game, I didn't see the full Roccat draft, but Fnatic first picked Galio anyway in a situation where I would have first picked something completely different. So I don't know. Blue side seems to be really strange today, and a lot of the top teams are able to actually pick sides this whole week. Blue side should be strongest. I agree that blue side should be strongest right now. But they're doing really strange things in draft, and make it really curious to see what actually is going on in their scrims.
So how much does the team feel the Shook effect? Is it an actual thing?
I mean, the Shook the Shook effect is less of like that Shook's like hard carrying them or solo carrying them or anything like that. I'm going to go over what I totally didn't go over in my first interview of him, that totally did not get randomly deleted for any reason at all. But the Shook effect, as I explained on the H2K video on the H2K YouTube channel, is more that Shook was the last person we needed who is on the same page as everyone else when it comes to concepts like playing to strong side, playing to tempo. We had been doing a lot of VOD reviews, so we knew how to play out mid to late game concepts. Considering that everybody was essentially on the same page in terms of map movements. So Shook coming on acted as like the last piece of the puzzle. That's basically the TLDR of like Shook effect. And this is also why I feel like Kasing effect was a thing. And Kasing has now said on the Euphoria podcast that Hyanan was like the big shot caller as well. It's not like Shook added like a huge shot calling element or anything. The big voices are still the big voices, which I would say would be Smitty and Sprattle the most. Shook's just a damn good jungler on his own merits, and everyone's very happy to have him on board. But now we have 5 people on the same page for a lot of mid to late game instances. Obviously, you could work on the early game aspect of that. So the team's cautiously optimistic going into a lot of games now. I think after today, we're very optimistic just about our mid to late game play in general. We now know that, for example, the very first Fnatic game that we had wasn't essentially like a complete fluke, and it's actually representative of how we actually play mid to late game versus other teams.
Now, does that mean in the long-term run that H2K will be a hot contender for Summer Split then?
For Summer Split, I legit think that we're looking to make a gauntlet run in summer, yeah. This is considering we don't make playoffs, which is obviously still the aim. It's going to be difficult, but this was obviously the hardest game that we were theoretically going to have, and we seem to have done really well with that. So if we make playoffs this split, I'm still looking to make a deep run at playoffs. We need to fix a lot of strategic issues, obviously. But I think for Summer Split, we're still looking to be a team that can go to Worlds. That aim has not changed whatsoever. And obviously, if we're a team that's looking to go to Worlds, we're still going to be a team that will look to do well at Worlds. Like, that's not going to change either. And there's a lot of precedents in Europe for stuff like that. Splice, for example, in 2016, they were 5-13. Yeah, my math is right there. 5-13 team in the spring split there, and then they went to Worlds next split, and they even took game of RNG, which is all TSM had to do to get out of that group, by the way. So I'm very optimistic. I think Europe is a very strong region, even though we're apparently getting away just on the pure basis of draft phase versus top teams. I still think Europe is a very strong region. So if we were to go to Worlds, and that is still the aim, then I'd still be optimistic about doing well there as well.
The euphoria is for sure real.
Oh, euphoria is always real. There are players in Europe that you don't get in any other country in the world. That's obviously an obvious thing to say, but the way that the player base has evolved in Europe has crafted a very distinct, particular kind of stubborn, sure of themselves, confident, cocky individual, and a community with which, I mean, you're almost ostracized if you're bad at the game. Like, that's how Europe develops its players. Korea develops it in a different way, but in Europe, that's how it's being developed. You have to be good, or you're of like a lower status in Europe. That's something that was like always missing in North America, and that's why I don't think the North American home scene ever really like pushed out, you know?
Interesting take for sure. I mean, yeah, some call it solo you being really toxic in solo queues. Others say it's a good process of
that's been the benefit.
Weeding out.
Yeah, but that's been the benefit. That's like a benefit of the toxicity of Europe, in a way. Like, I've worked with a lot of the players that would otherwise be considered like really toxic in my career, throughout Origin, throughout H2K, now with H2K again, and even in Shotcaller, like a lot of players that people consider toxic on the outset. These are generally the players that demand a special level from their team and from themselves. There's a standard in Europe, and it's set in a different manner to how, I guess, like a clean way that people would expect it to be set, but it has been set this way, and I think Europe produces consistently good individual players because of this.
Interesting. It reminds me of like the Spartan process of weeding out soldiers, essentially.
Without all of the child killing, sure.
Yeah, I mean that's the small part.
Also, none of the rape or any of that stuff.
Yeah, just a lot of toxicity. But
I mean, people have used that word, but now we kind of clamp down for using that word. Yeah.
Unlucky. Well, realistically, you still have. we still have you guys still face Splice, Schalke.
Yeah.
Gauntlet is very much possible now, given that we have a 5-way tie in EU right now. That makes me so happy as a European.
Yes, there was a Season 3. There was a 6-way tie, I do believe. That was the first time that I stayed up all night watching League of Legends. I remember back in Season 3. Yeah, I was pretty late into the game, by the way. And I remember that ended with CLGU bringing out an Amumu Misfortune composition versus Gambit, because everyone was just so tired at that point. It was, you could visibly see Gambit was like falling asleep at their desk, and he's all like, all right, fuck it, everyone's tired. This is piss easy to play. Let's fucking go for it. And they went for it.
Yes.
That was beautiful. It does look like there's a potential to get like a ridiculous tie. Right now, I'm thinking that the next 3 games you just mentioned are very winnable. And we could avoid the tie process altogether. And that is my aim right now. If we do get into a tie process, that would very likely be with Giants, I guess, unless we lose the Roccat game. And we'll prepare for it like we should. But obviously the aim right now is to avoid a tie. The game I'm most looking forward to is tomorrow's actually. The
one against Splice?
The Splice game, yeah, because I have a lot of respect for Peter. Me and him have actually been friends for a few years. And I want to see how he's planned for this one, because his plans are always rather, I wouldn't say unique, but he does very tailored plans. He has a different way of thinking about the game than I do. We're at odds on a lot of areas, and I like to see that argument play out better on stage this time than last time. Last time we played was like a really big transitional period. We had that week before we were going to bring on Shook, and we had Casual subbing in jungle during that time. So I want to see how that would play out on stage here. I really want to play him in playoffs in a best of 5. I just really want this whole argument to play out, and I want to win that argument. So even though it's just going to be a best of 1 tomorrow, and it'll probably just be who comes in with the cheesier plan wins, I really want to face him in playoffs, and I'll still always be looking forward most to playing Splice in EU for that reason. And shout out to Peter, because I genuinely think he's really smart. He'll probably get my vote for coach of the split. So yeah.
Battle of the coaches. I'm looking forward to that as well. Yeah, because we don't really have that. Don't have that mentality seemingly that coaches have an insane amount of impact compared to other sports specifically, where it's like the team, for example, is doing badly, it's on the coach. The team is doing well, it's on the coach usually. But in esports, it's kind of like, yeah, they are there, but they only play so much of a role, and people have criticized that, and people have criticized, Prolly getting coach of the split several times, even though others should have gone.
You have to think of why Prolly got coach of the split, and I think it's that only recently did the pool of coaches in Europe somewhat settle down. Like, me and Peter are brand new. Yeah. Like, we're brand new in terms of being LCS coaches. I have history of H2K. Already from 2016, so that already gives me more of a history than some of the coaches you had coming in last split. And some of the orgs that were constantly changing. Like, how many times did Fnatic change coaches last split? Basically 3 times, no? And now they even brought in Youngbuck. Yeah. So it's difficult to tailor like narratives like, it's obviously this guy, because there would be a consistent thing through that. That's why Yamato, Cannon, and Prolly had such big followings, because you could easily identify like, this is a very Prolly thing. This is a very Yamato thing, So I think you'll see those narratives be played more and more next year, maybe, once coaching is much more consistent. I think Peter was a good pickup that they'll probably be able to stick with. Maybe that will be up to him, obviously. I think Grabs was probably robbed last year of a coach of the split, but I can understand why Prolly got it. And last year I was thinking, well, this is fair because Prolly was robbed of coach of the split the year before. So, I mean, all these
constant robbery.
All these awards are about who is the nicest to everyone and who everybody has like a high opinion of and don't think is a dick, And I am a huge dick, so I don't expect to win any award.
Okay, yeah, that's an honest take, I guess. Is there anything you would like to say to the H2K fans out there who are hoping for playoffs, of course?
Well, thanks for sticking with us. Any of you who stuck with us through the whole transitional period, thumbs up to you, and this victory is definitely for you. I want to give a shout out to a Redditor called Wastivez, something like that. But I've seen you back us up and support us throughout some really dark times, and you've been a real consistent supporter. I never saw that flare go away, so I want to thank you for that. And yeah, we're going to make huge improvements. Today's game was not representative of how this iteration of H2K can play, should play, has played in scrims. We'll identify what's going wrong, transitioning our scrim performances to stage performances. Obviously, you'll never get a 1-to-1 in that. And hopefully we'll be able to win next time just because we're a good team all round and not because we basically perfect game draft. So,
Fair enough. Now, this was Veteran from H2K and Darius from the Shotcaller. Hope you had a good day. See you then. Hey everyone, this is Darius from the Shotcaller, and I hope you just enjoyed that interview. This is a generic end card, so make sure to click here for another interview or here for a different interview. And if you want to check out more content, specifically from the NALCS, make sure to visit theshotcaller.net for more interviews and other esports content. Have a good day.